There was a story last night that came out. It was really ridiculous. And it was like late last night. Let me share with you the story first. It immediately was, it was NBC that reported it. And here's how her name is Heidi Prisbila. And she wrote, her husband is dead and she's in the ICU after ingesting chloroquine. And then we have this audio soundbite from this woman who they did an interview. NBC did an interview with her. And the woman told she told the person, this is, audio soundbite 24. This is from that NBC report.
Did you at any point hear that the FDA had not approved of it for coronavirus purposes, or?
Yes. But, they kept saying that it was approved for other things, and, Trump kept saying it was, basically pretty much a cure.
What would be your message to the American public?
Oh my God, don't take anything. Don't believe anything. Don't believe anything the president says and his people, because they don't know what they're talking about. And don't take anything. Be so careful and call your doctor.
So an Arizona man and his wife, they were trying to prevent the coronavirus. And so they ingested fish tank cleaner because they read on it that there was some kind of chloroquine in it. I'm totally serious with you. Here's the story. An Arizona man has died after ingesting chloroquine phosphate, believing it would protect him from becoming infected with the coronavirus. The man's wife also ingested the substance and is under critical care. The name chloroquine resonated with the man's wife, who asked that her name not be used to protect the family's privacy. She had used it previously to treat her koi fish. Quote, I was in the pantry stacking food, and I just saw it sitting in that stacking dog food, and I saw it sitting in the back shelf, and I thought, hey, isn't that the stuff they're talking about on TV? And it was, end quote. The couple, both in their 60s and potentially at higher risk for complications of the virus, decided to mix a small amount of the substance with a liquid and drink it as a way to prevent the coronavirus. She said, we were afraid of getting sick. Now, they prescribe chloroquine is the malaria, hydroxychloroquine is lupus. And that is prescribed in milligrams. You can have, and thank heavens, thank you, high school chemistry. God love you. Kids, this is why you need to study, even though you're at home and doing classes, because literally my sophomore year of chemistry kicked into gear. So they are literally completely different things. My husband had even said, it's like saying hydrogen peroxide is the same thing as hydrogen, permanganate, or that table salt is the same thing as other forms of like sodium, whatever. No. It literally is, it goes down to a molecular difference. They're literally two different things. And the fish tank cleaner had even more stuff in it. They're different. You can be a part of let me put it like this. You can be a part of the same family and still be different because of compounds and et cetera. But apparently they just saw chloroquine and they decided to do it. And every media outlet literally blamed Trump last night. It trended. Fish tank cleaner was like a top 4 trend because someone ate it. And that's like saying someone out there going, I read that penicillin like cures serious bacterial infections. And then I'm going to go out, eat every bit of mold I can find. Well, guess what? You'll probably die. So don't do that. It's like someone said, oh, look, a household version of calcium supplements, and it's something for your pool, calcium hypochlorite. Don't do that, right? But I mean, let me just give you some examples here. There was NBC that ran it. They said that it was Trump's fault. You also, oh my gosh, I have so many things on this. You also had Gizmodo, you had Axios. Axios finally deleted their tweet a day later because they originally tweeted, a man has died after ingesting chloroquine phosphate, one of the anti-malaria drugs that Trump has mentioned in recent days. Oh my gosh, it's not even the same thing. First off, oh, wait a minute. Can I just say a prayer? Lord, please give me the patience to deal with these people. And please put a hand over my mouth when I cannot do it myself. Oh my gosh, Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen. Chloroquine phosphate was not something that he ever mentioned. It's completely not that. And he also never told people to self-medicate. You have to have a prescription to get hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, which is not the same thing as chloroquine phosphate. And like I said, it is something that they prescribe in the milligrams. And this dude apparently, according to Forbes, ate a teaspoon. Okay, so stop it. So that was Axios. And then you had Dr. Pundit. Who is this chick? She's an actual doctor. She's an MD. She's an expert, and she's been on Fox and BBC and Sky News. And she said, quote, breaking, a man died. A man died and his wife is in ICU after they ingested chloroquine, one of the anti-malarials that Trump touted. Oh my gosh. And she didn't bother telling anyone that it was actually fish tank cleaner that you can just buy at a pet store. And it says, do not ingest on it, along with a picture of a fish. It's used to treat parasites in fish. Who looks at a bag that says, clearly has an orange sticker, says do not ingest, has a picture of a fish on it, and eats it? I mean, it's awful, but this is the kind of crap that media gets into. And also, I'm just going to say, I mean, is it like the new Tide Pod? Oh, this is something that is breaking, and this comes from a reporter that I follow, Bill Melugan, out in Los Angeles. He says, breaking, LA County Sheriff tells me he is beginning to close county gun stores immediately. Deputies are currently going to the stores one by one to order them shut down. The sheriff is to utilize scofflaw violations for any gun store that is still open after he deemed them non-essential. And the sheriff, he says, this is a crock of crap, told me that he is a gun owner himself and supports the Second Amendment, but believes too many first-time buyers are panicking and bringing guns into homes where people are locked down, which he believes is a recipe for disaster with potential accidental shootings. First off, he has no data on this at all whatsoever. You're not supportive of the Second Amendment if you are using it's not even anecdotal. It's just your prejudice as a way to deprive people of their Second Amendment rights. This is BS, and it is constitutional rights denied. And I would love to try to get him on air too, by the way. Let's get this. I want him to explain his position because I would love to hear the data involved to support his reasoning for denying people their rights. First off, you're telling businesses to close. And I think this is an essential business. I mean, for crying out loud, Illinois determined that gun stores were essential businesses. And I always love the people who start by saying, well, I support the Second Amendment or I'm a gun owner. Bull blank you do. I don't believe that for 1 second. Don't sit here and tell me that you support the Second Amendment as you defend your abridgment of it. Not even abridgment. That's not even at its heart the correct way to put this. Your suppression, your denial, your restriction of it. Because that is a denial of right. So you can't sit here and say that you support the Second Amendment while you're also trying to justify in the same breath and defend your restriction of it. I mean, for him to, he's making a judgment about people who are purchasing firearms. I will have to say also, sidebar somewhat, there were a lot of people who were gun control advocates before who are really mad that they can't just like go in some of these states and buy guns and just walk out like they thought they could. Oh, yeah. Oh, there's a tiny violin. Now you have to see everything that you did to restrict good, innocent people from being able to access their Second Amendment rights. And that's exactly what this is. Yeah, this is happening in Pennsylvania as well. And I've heard that Dallas County in Texas, that this was something that they were considering, that gun stores are going to be declared like non-essential, which is garbage. And this is at the same time when you have the district attorney in Dallas County who doesn't even go after, turns his back on a number of crimes. There's just certain crimes that he won't even go after. Yeah, Dallas County is expected to. Some people have been talking that they might be closing gun stores as they do not consider them essential businesses. But hey, the liquor stores are going to be open. That's going to be essential business. Liquor ain't in the Constitution, but firearms are. So there's no way in hell I'd shut down. I'm going to tell you, this is not the way to handle all of this stuff. Not the way to handle it. I mean, and I know that there are a couple of Supreme Court, and state Supreme Court decisions as well. I remember after Hurricane Katrina, there was something that Bobby Jindal had pushed through when he was in the House, and there were a couple of other decisions that discuss what a state can or cannot do with emergency powers during a time such as this, a global pandemic, and how you can't declare certain firearms stores, FFLs, et cetera, to be non-essential. I mean, that's... Someone made, a friend of mine made the remark that there's a lot more tax revenue to the state and locality from booze than gun revenue. And that's why they declare a lot of these liquor stores to be essential, because they want that revenue. You SOBs. You SOBs. Realistically, when can we actually when can we start this? When can we, in the United States, without kicking off even worse relations than we have right now with the propaganda war and everything else, really realistically start bringing this back, manufacturing what we need in the United States, controlling that supply chain? Because I know that we also have to have that uncomfortable conversation about the amount of U.S. debt that China owns.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dana. And the answer to your question is we need to start doing this now. And the reason is that the reliance on China is critical. It's not going to get any better. A lot of people in the industry that have benefited from having factories in China want us to increase our dependence on China at this point. For instance, they want President Trump to give relief on tariffs and all the rest of it. That's absolutely the wrong direction to go. You know, it's unfortunate that we got ourselves here, but what we shouldn't be doing is going to China and asking for more assistance, because China right now has been extremely hostile to the U.S. It's tried to tar our image around the world, said that we were the origin of the virus, that the U.S. Army brought it to Wuhan.
Yeah.
We really don't have very much choice. China is driving this, and we've got to start protecting ourselves, as President Trump said yesterday, with this American independence agenda.
Right. We're talking with Gordon Chang. You can find him at gordonchang.com and on Twitter at Gordon G. Chang as well. A lot of timely stuff up there. You mentioned as well how the propaganda coming from Beijing is that the United States really ultimately they place this in China. They place this in Wuhan. But I mean, we know that that's not true, and that this was a problem that has actually been watched for quite some time. The SARS epidemic, when SARS broke out, there was discussion about the wet markets and also Beijing's communist control, the top-down control, and how that contributed to the spread of that almost pandemic, and how everyone said it was just a ticking time bomb, but nothing was ever done. China didn't alter, to my knowledge, any regulation, any way that they governed or anything to prevent it from happening again.
Yeah, not for more than 2 weeks, because at the time of SARS, which was 2002, 2003, Beijing said it was going to close down the wet markets in the country. Well, they didn't. And many people think that the coronavirus started in a wet market in Wuhan, which is one of the two theories that are out there. The other, that it was an accidental release from a virology lab, a P4 biosafety unit. So there's been remarkably little done. And what we have seen, Dana, between 2002 and now is the Communist Party also just with this extraordinary suppression of information. It was the same then, it's the same now. If there's any difference at all, and it might be a minor difference, it's because of social media exists now and it didn't exist then. But basically the party's response is 100% the same.
I have been amazed to see some of the headlines with respect to the accusations that were flying around from China to the United States. And I was also amazed to see the head of the World Health Organization, and this was, I think, the very beginning of January, praise China for its response to this pandemic, when we know very well that they were jailing doctors, they were deleting reporting from newspaper websites, they were persecuting journalists, they were deleting data, they were telling researchers to stop researching for vaccines for this. And all the while politicizing that emergency pandemic meeting that the World Health Organization was hosting by excluding Taiwan, who I would think everyone could have learned from, considering the amount of travel that takes place between those two countries. Why is it that no one ever points that out, at least in media? I'm starting to see some of it now, but that's never been a real focus about, just to the extent that China has politicized the World Health Organization.
Yeah, this is really important, Dana, because the WHO actually hindered the world's response to the coronavirus. So, for instance, it delayed declaring this to be an emergency, and it declaring this to be a pandemic. And clearly it's a pandemic. Now, countries could have acted a lot quicker if they had moved according to their own instincts, not waited for the WHO, which downplayed this. The head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, actually said that China's response to the coronavirus showed the superiority of the socialist system.
Right.
And if you live in a democracy, you've got to be very concerned about that statement.
Yes, very concerned. And we've seen that not just obviously with the WHO. We've talked previously about just what we've seen with Hollywood and everything that really China is involved with here in the United States, and whether it's the WHO, whether it's them hiding the virus's genome sequencing. Ultimately, because this is such a problem that to be realistic, both political parties, I think, have allowed it's allowed it to grow. How in the world can we even start in dealing with this problem with China? And is there a reason? Should we have a healthy fear of how much debt of ours that they own? Or is there anything that they even can do that would further jeopardize our markets? I mean, how would we handle this, and what do we need to watch out for?
Those are great questions. First of all, the one thing that we can do is President Trump is about to sign an executive order drafted by Peter Navarro, his trade advisor, about the robustness of the global supply chains, and especially pharmaceuticals. We're going to see a lot of action from the president on that. And that's a really important thing because we're so dependent upon China, and indeed also India, but especially China, for making pharmaceuticals, making the compounds that go into pharmaceuticals. They really have a chokehold on the supply chain of a number of critical things like antibiotics, blood thinners, the rest of it. With regard to debt, this is the one thing I don't worry so much about, and the reason is China's been selling our debt anyway because they've got to support the renminbi, their currency. And because of the way the global financial markets work, they cannot really dump dollars and treasury obligations without killing themselves off first. So they've threatened this since about August 2008, but they don't really do it because they know, first of all, the mechanics of the financial markets won't let them, but also because they realize that they're going to be the first victim and that we are so much stronger and will be able to survive it. But in general, the answer to your question is we cannot forget the maliciousness of China's response to us in the coronavirus epidemic, and we've got to start separating ourselves, cutting the links with China. As unfortunate as that may be, we've got to do it to protect the American Republic.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that, and sooner rather than later, because I can't imagine this getting any worse than it is right now. The talk of China perhaps paying any sort of reparations for this pandemic that they contributed to, I don't know do you find that realistic?
No, it's not realistic. There's a case in Florida right now that is suing China for something like $12 trillion or so. It's very difficult to maintain a suit against a foreign government because of the sovereign immunity. Also, you got to get jurisdiction over China, and China is not going to submit itself to the International Court of Justice or any other tribunal on something like this. There are, I think, when you think about the legal justifications, yes, they're there. But mechanically, you can't sue China. But we can impose costs on China. President Trump can do that without going to a court. The Congress can do that without going to a court. And that's what we need to do, cutting those links, imposing costs, because China's acted abominably in all of this and has really killed people and put other people's lives at risk.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of people have lost their lives because this pandemic was allowed to grow to the extent, to become a pandemic, quite frankly. And going back to, what we initially began our conversation on, just the medicines, et cetera, I was actually, and I almost feel silly for saying this because it wasn't until we really started getting a lot of headlines and actually discussing the resistance of certain existing antibiotics that I realized the extent that the grip that China has on that supply chain. I kind of wonder if a lot of other Americans were sort of in the same position and not really realizing that. I mean, you're looking at what it's something like 90% over some of the ingredients that are in our antibiotics come from China. And I didn't realize just ibuprofen and vitamin C. I mean, these are medicines that are critical to day-to-day life for Americans. That's a scary thing that I feel like we've really been apathetic about, that we've allowed it to go to that extent, to their advantage.
Yeah, of course. There is a woman named Rosemary Gibson who co-authored a great book, China RX. And that book's been out for a couple of years. People just ignored her. People have ignored the entire problem because many elements of the American society just profit from China. And so they try to drown out voices like Rosemary's. It's important for us now to start thinking about what we need to make inside our own borders, because we need to understand that we can't rely on other countries. Even some countries that are our close friends have denied us things which are critical to us. So this is, maybe not as economically efficient, but nonetheless, in order to maintain sovereignty, we've got to do it.
And have it work better in the long run. Last quick question for you. I know China was saying that their numbers were now on the decrease, that they were on the other side of this virus. Do you think that can be believed because they've haven't really been honest about their data prior to this?
Yeah. I think China is about to start a second wave of infections. We're starting to see infections go up. They are lying from all that we can tell. Yes, it's less than it was in February, but no, it's not on the downswing. It's on the upswing now, Dana.
Joining me now, James Rosen, national correspondent with Sinclair, also a New York Times best-selling author, and he had a very interesting piece out just recently that it's kind of a bombshell. He actually is looking at some of the tension going on between some of these different bureaucratic agencies, of which the CDC is one, and whether or not the administration was perhaps misled about the CDC's ability to produce these test kits in a timely fashion to the number that was needed. And we've talked about that with some of these other regulations as it relates to the FDA quite a bit for the last couple of weeks. But the question now is, was the administration misled? And James joins us now. James, so good to have you. I appreciate your time today. Tell us what you discovered when you looked into this.
Dana, great to be back with you, if only via telephone. So I published a story for my employer, the Sinclair Broadcast Group. We own 200 television stations across the country. So we did a TV story. You can find it on my Twitter feed, @JamesRosenTV. And we also did a print version of it, which is a little longer and more detailed, also on my Twitter feed. The basic thrust was that we spoke with a former Assistant Secretary of HHS for Preparedness and Response. That was his actual title. His name was Christopher Meekins. And this is someone who has participated in a lot of disaster relief and other sort of mass casualty events like this. And he told us on the record that the reason why the nation fell weeks behind in the development of these coronavirus test kits, as he put it to me, and I'm quoting Mr. Meekins now, from my conversations with members of the coronavirus task force, both inside and outside the administration, the U.S. government, from Secretary Azar to the president, relied on the Centers for Disease Control to produce a test. They failed. Meekins continued, CDC said they would handle it. And he added, what we have found out is that these leaders at the CDC lied to both the HHS secretary and, by extension, the president. And as a result, the nation got weeks behind, end quote. Now, of course, we checked in with HHS. They said, in essence, that they've been working hard 24/7. We checked in with CDC, whose leaders are being accused of deception here. And we got a statement from a spokesperson for Dr. Robert Redfield, the head of the Centers for Disease Control, who in essence said the same. They've been working 24/7, and they regret that anyone will be misinformed during a time like this. The fact is, CDC did have early difficulty producing those test kits, Dana. And at a certain point, the CDC, or I should say the Trump administration, had to get the private sector involved. CDC told us we recommended that the private sector be involved. But from the comments of Dr. Fauci and others, like the ones you just played at the beginning of this segment, it's clear that the Trump administration's experience with CDC was an unhappy one, and that the transition to getting the private sector involved reflected that dissatisfaction with CDC's early performance.
Ooh, and to your point with that, James, that dovetails with the story of Dr. Helen Chu, a Seattle infectious disease expert who had collected a bunch of these nasal swabs and early on wanted to test them because she had a suspicion that this could be this Wuhan coronavirus. And this was very, I think, in the beginning of January. But yet she was told by the CDC and her team that they could not test it, that there were certain regulations that not just her, but also her lab needed to meet, including these clinical laboratory regulations that were established by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So, in essence, it seems that there was a lot of red tape that contributed to the slowdown of this and the inability to respond to it. And I'm sure at some point after we all get through this as a country, that absolutely has to be dealt with, because frankly, with the taxes that we pay and with all of the people that work with these different agencies, there's no excuse whatsoever for them to not anticipate and prepare for a pandemic, particularly since apparently they were aware of this in December when the task force started to be assembled. So they could have fast-tracked some of this. Is that fair to say?
Well, we have to be fair about this. President Trump has suggested at times that the reason for the United States' slow or somewhat delayed response to all of this, keep in mind that, again, where the testing is concerned, South Korea is the country in the world that has demonstrated the most successful response to coronavirus, in large measure because within 1 week of its first reported case, South Korea was able to test 66,000 people within its first week.
Yeah.
We had tested about 60,000 people only by March 18. But President Trump, in explaining this, has suggested at times that this was due to a deficiency in the policies left over from the Obama administration. If that's true, it has to be said that President Trump, who began this year more or less at the cusp of his third year in office, had 2+ years to fix these deficient policies, and according to numerous accounts, got rid of various officials and offices that would have been useful in dealing with a pandemic like this. So I suppose, as usual, there's blame to go around on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, and hopefully we can streamline this and better be able to respond a lot more quickly. I do like what Dr. Fauci said, and that the private sector is stepping up, and I do like that some of these other regulations have been relaxed, so that we can partner with them and more cooks in the kitchen. This is probably the only time where that theory is acceptable, I think, James.
Well, provided they're all wearing the appropriate, protective gear.
Right, exactly. James Rosen, always appreciate you, and I really appreciated this story. This was great, and I'll make sure to tweet it out here. Thank you, James. Jeff Bregman is the president of American Gun Works, and he's got a small shop, and they have apparently been seeing a ton of business. They're there in Glendale, California. And he's, of course, it's the same location as the very, very famous King's Gun Works there in Glendale, California. And he joins us right now. Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you. I hope you're staying, I'm sure you're staying busy, but I hope you're staying healthy and safe, my friend.
So far, so good.
Excellent. So you, as I understand, you have kind of a small shop, and with all of this stuff, with this pandemic happening, there are now, I've been seeing lines at various stores, not just in California, but in states across the country, lines at a lot of these gun shops. And you have said that you said that you are not used to this level of business. Tell me what your experience has been like.
Basically, it's been overwhelming. We've had to mitigate lines by taking phone numbers and having people wait in their cars, so we don't have a visible line, because that draws attention.
Yep.
And then they might come and say, "Oh, you're being dangerous. We're going to close you down."
That's actually really smart to just do the number and have them in their cars like that. That is smart.
And but I've got 2 computers to process and 3 staff members that can use those computers. And so the equipment that I have to do for California, I have to process each gun sale in, and I have to process it out on the computer. Takes about 20 minutes. ammunition sales, each individual sale has to process in and process out. It takes
Oh
about
my
20 minutes or so.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I got a maximum of 6 people in my shop. I can have 3 people taking a test. Which has to be processed through the computer, which I only have 2 of.
Oh my gosh. I'm
And I
like,
can have 3 people processing sales.
oh my gosh.
And and I can't I'm not a large cap shop. I can't just pick up the phone and order a half dozen computers, half dozen ID card scanners, and say have it here tomorrow, and then have the space to set it up to process all of this.
Wow. Yeah, I can. So, I mean, it's kind of even it's oppressive even before a global pandemic. You had to deal with a lot even before a global pandemic, and now this is just making it crazier. The people who are coming to your store,
and the volume.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the volume is crashing the systems. I can't even process some of the payments I have to make to the state.
Wow.
To be able to process customers.
Wow.
Because some of the stuff we have to do, we have to process each customer and pay the state the fees at that time only. We can't run an account.
Jiminy Christmas. Holy cow. And I noticed, and his website, folks, is AmericanGunworks.net. And he said, we are open until we are forced to close. No lines outside our store, please. And I'm sure that you were watching some of the actions of some of these lawmakers in your state, as well as the LA County sheriff, who was walking around telling gun stores that, oh, you're non-essential, we're going to shut you down. But then he ended up getting checked a little bit. And as it turned out, he was not in the right on that. They had the county councilors, I understand it, come down and say, actually, this can be deemed as an essential business according to state law and with the governor's declaration, so these stores can stay open. And then Villanueva was describing it as being in limbo, which that sounds like the opposite of being in limbo. What when you're dealing with customers and they're coming in, because it seems that the biggest objection that some of these officials had in your state is that, well, these are all new gun owners. They're crazy. You're going to see a crime. I actually read an article the other day where there were people suggesting that there's going to be a spike in crime because new people apparently are going out and purchasing firearms. But as you were literally just explaining in depth, they still have to go through all of these steps. So that doesn't make sense. When you talk to these people, what are you hearing from the folks who are coming to your store?
Most of them are afraid of the criminals being released by the sheriff's department and the state.
Yep.
Okay. They still have to wait 10 days minimum to pick up their firearm, and longer if I'm not open on their pickup day.
Jeez. Yep. Yeah. And for those who didn't know, there were a lot of inmates going free. And we had some of these headlines earlier. A lot of these inmates are being released, state prison inmates, etc. And you have gun stores that they were wanting to close down, but the inmates they were setting free.
Right. So a lot of people are afraid of that. I have single mothers coming in afraid of their ex relationship. Mm-hmm. For domestic violence issues, and they feel that the chaos is going to give their ex an opportunity to come and cause them harm.
Wow.
I have people who are afraid of the possibility of looting, of general burglaries and robberies increasing because LAPD and the Sheriff's Department are not responding.
Wow.
There's a number of issues. These people aren't panic buying. They're not going, give me every gun you can get. And I've got some people who go, this is my incentive to buy the gun I've always wanted. The problem is there's no supply, and they're coming in with a list of, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. Can't get it.
Yeah. Not gonna happen. Not that fast.
Not gonna happen. Plus, I use the term surge pricing. Because I don't know if I'm going to be open, and I got to be able to take care of my people and my landlord. Mm-hmm. I can't camp on grants, so if I get closed down, I need to have that extra profit to make sure I can get through. I'm not gouging, but I got to raise my prices.
Yeah. No, I mean there's a difference there. Yeah, for sure. This.
And
I want to get your response to the accusation that these people that are coming in, and I liked how you put it with the panic buying, because there, when you do have announcements that there are certain crimes that are just not going to be prosecuted at this time, and when you have inmates that are being released, I mean, that's not really a panic response. That's people who are just, they're planning. That is a planning response, not a panic response.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
From your experience, the people who come in, these are not dumb people. These are people who want to know what it is and as you were saying, they come in with the list. They already know what they're purchasing. They know what they're getting into. These are people who are obviously going to also seek out how to use the inanimate object that they are purchasing from you.
Yes. Most of my customers have asked about training aspects. We are referring them to the California Rifle and Pistol Association for for licensed instructors.
Yep.
So that they can find a qualified instructor in their area. And of course, CRPA is a affiliate of the NRA, so they usually have a crossover list. But any individual instructors that I know right now, most aren't taking new clients because they're booked for months.
Right. Yeah, that can be.
But
that can be tough.
People are asking. We're trying to provide the best basic services we can. But we've had to turn away customers too, because their manner and demeanor is one. I don't want them owning a firearm.
Yeah, and that's smart. And you have
because
that.
of their manner and demeanor.
Exactly.
And if they scare me, a diehard libertarian about gun ownership, okay.
That's good, and people don't realize. Yeah, exactly. Gun store owners have that ability. They have that discretion that they can put into practice. Last question I have for you: when you hear firearm stores described as being non-essential during a time when all of this is going on, what is your response to that?
Self-defense and defense of your family is a first essential aspect of life in general. Self-defense and defense of your family is not only an essential service that we provide, it is a duty for each individual to take up upon themselves.
Yeah. Amen to that.
That's
Jeff
how I see
Bregman.
it.
Jeff Bregman is president of American Gun Works, and you can find them at americangunworks.net. Jeff, I so appreciate what you do. And I appreciate you serving all those people that are just realizing, you know what, I've always wanted to, be a responsible firearm owner. And, considering, we got people telling us that they're releasing criminals, I think now's probably the time to actually look into that. I appreciate what you do in that area, especially in this time of increasing hostility towards rights and inanimate objects. And I appreciate your time today. I know you're a busy man. Thank you so much. Joining me right now, Texas Senator John Cornyn, who has been in the middle of it. And he and Schumer, Senator, first off, welcome to the program. It's good to have you. I was just reading a piece a little bit earlier today where you and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer were kind of going back and forth a little bit as it relates to the Senate bill that we all thought, and that the Senate Majority Leader, that he even described as being bipartisan up until Nancy Pelosi got back from vacation. What happened?
Yeah, it's really pathetic. We were making good progress and recognizing that a lot of people are out of work through no fault of their own and need some help quickly. Not when Nancy Pelosi gets around to it. Speaker Pelosi came in after a week-long recess and dropped an 1,100-page bill with all of their liberal wish list relating from everything from climate change to organized labor to emissions limits for airplanes, and insisted that it be part of this bill, delaying us now after two separate failed votes from getting help to the people who need it most, and which are the 29 million people I represent and the rest of the American people. Yeah,
we were going over some of those the Christmas tree ornaments in her bill. I mean, everything from diversity boards to pay equity with men and women, and all kind money to the Kennedy Center. There was a lot of special interest stuff in there. These things have nothing to do with economic relief to people. The Senate bill looked to be, regardless of how people, and I know that there's a lot of discussion over deficit and everything else, but ultimately, I don't really see what other course of action we have. And this was a pretty straight no chaser bill.
Well, the goal is, of course, to get money to people who are out of work. I'm thinking of hourly workers, people who work for tips, and people who live from paycheck to paycheck who's got to provide food and the necessities of life for their family. How do we help them before they can get on the unemployment rolls and receive unemployment compensation? We've also tried to beef that up, but obviously that's not something you can snap your fingers and turn it on. So the other part of it is we want to make sure that in addition to our fight against the coronavirus, when we win that fight, we want to make sure that people still have jobs to go back to.
Right.
And that's why we're throwing a lifeline to small businesses as well as larger employers who employ hundreds of thousands, even millions of Americans.
Yeah, some of the accusations that came from Democrats as to the Senate bill were that it was a slush fund and that it was forgetting about the worker and it was just a bailout for corporations. Now, unless suddenly I just became illiterate and could not actually comprehend what I read with my own eyes, Senator, in the Senate bill, there was a cap on salaries, also a prohibition against stock buybacks. I didn't see anything slush fund in the bill. Is there something perhaps that they are referring to that maybe it was written in invisible ink?
Yeah, well, they just made it up because they needed an excuse for holding up this necessary and important relief, and they had to make something up. They knew all along that there were contractual provisions. In fact, this isn't a bailout at all. For these larger businesses, they're going to have to enter into contracts and pay back the money that they are borrowing through the Federal Reserve and through the Treasury. So this was just an effort to put a respectable face on the delay, which they knew was solely for the purpose of exploiting the leverage they felt like they had to extract more concessions and spend more money. And unfortunately, they're pretty good at it.
Yeah, well, very good at it, of course. One of the headlines I saw, Boeing's CEO said he doesn't want any government equity stake for taxpayer aid, and that if that was a requirement, that the company would reject the government aid for the pandemic relief. What is your response to those companies who say, no, thanks, we don't want that stake, we don't want to have to deal with that? I obviously think, well, if that's one way to make companies, I guess, handle it themselves. But what is your overall response, and are you worried that could actually contribute, heaven forbid, to rising unemployment after all is said and done?
Well, I think we are going to see a huge negative decline in our gross domestic product. There's going to be a lot of people out of work, hopefully not for long. Hopefully that will be temporary. As you know, Boeing has had a lot of problems even before this coronavirus with the 737 MAX aircraft that's had all sorts of problems. I'm not familiar with the details of their balance sheet, but the company's entitled to handle this the way they see fit. It could be they end up declaring Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which would allow them essentially to continue their operations while they deal with some of their debt and their finances. But this is going to be a painful period for everybody. But why in the world would you want to make it worse, which is exactly what Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are doing?
Yeah, well, no, make it worse and make it last longer. What is that? What is your estimate or idea as to what the Senate is going to agree on and when? Where are you all at in that process at this point?
Well, what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of energy in getting this done today, but we're still waiting for final text. And I hate this idea that they're going to dump this 1,000-page bill in front of us and say, okay, now you have to vote on it in 3 or 4 hours. We've been trying our best to keep up with the changes from the original text that Senator McConnell introduced, and now we're circulating redlined versions that demonstrate what the changes are. But there's no question in my mind that while this is an emergency and we need to act quickly, this will not be the last thing we need to do.
I think at some point you have to know when you're beat. But I also think this. Folks, we're going to have people in Congress that are, from time to time, are going to do things with which we disagree. And I have a lot less patience and less grace for those members of Congress who have done this repeatedly, who have repeatedly compromised our rights, or who have indicated that they would fold in when at a time when we would need them to stand strongest the most, right? And I get the president's mad about it, and I would be too if I was in a pressure cooker like he is. And again, I like people who just let it all out there. But I would caution people. You don't want to throw out a stalwart conservative. And if he was coming at this from any other perspective than watching out for and I get it, you're saying that, well, it's also passing this and helping people's watching out for the people. I understand your point. But he's also, in his perspective, watching out for the people. He's watching out for, I mean, we were just talking about this. You realize this bill is a third of our GDP. And I'll tell you this, if we don't cut spending, when we get right again, after we get through this, and depending on how long it goes, you will see some elections, some campaigns in trouble. That's a guarantee. Because it always comes back to the economy. People vote their 401ks. And that's why it's a weird time. We are at a very profound moment in history. So, people, instead of getting mad at Massey, people should realize, all right, we're disagreeing. He has been a stalwart conservative for a long time. And on many issues, particularly Second Amendment rights. He has been, in many instances, one of very few voices of reason on that. And everyone ought to be very careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. Because you need more people like that than not. There have been many, many times when even certain organizations looked like they were folding. And Massey didn't. So, I appreciate that kind of loyalty where it concerns Second Amendment issues. I appreciate that kind of loyalty where it concerns pro-life issues. And I appreciate that kind of loyalty where it concerns lawmakers looking out for the taxpayer, even during a time when it seems most politically incorrect. Let us not form a rage mob. Mark Fisher. He is let me read his Twitter bio. Washington Post senior editor, co-author of Trump Revealed, and author of Something in the Air and After the Wall. Oh my gosh, no one cares. I also love salmon. That's my favorite fish, and my favorite color is green. I mean, seriously, no one cares. Nobody. So I guess he got into a fight with some dude named Scott McMillan. So this is what Mark Fisher tweeted. This is so stupid. It's going to kill brain cells without the benefit of any redneck Riviera. This is what Mark Fisher tweeted. This was last night about 6:30. He tweets, Scott McMillan, a 56-year-old lawyer, tweeted that it's more vital to revive the economy than to save people who are not productive, like the elderly and infirm. So I called his parents. I'm not making this up. It's a real tweet. And then here was his headline. This is a headline. This is what this man chose for his headline of his piece at the Washington Post senior editor. He urged saving the economy over protecting those who are not productive from the coronavirus. Then he faced America's wrath. This dude had like 400 followers on Twitter. Like, he wasn't this guy he's going at, this Scott McMillan fellow. He had 400 some odd followers, and he was just a rando. He was just sharing an opinion that this guy... How did this phone call go? Hello, Mr. and Mrs. McMillan?
How old are they?
My name is, yes, this is Mark Fisher, the modern day Bob Woodward from the Washington Post. I'm just wondering if you have any comment at all whatsoever about Scott's Twitter post tonight. His Twitter post. Twitter. It's like an ever evolving online message board. That's not really the point, but he wrote something, Mrs. McMillan. He wrote something that I didn't like on Twitter. Twitter. Yes. Is that how that call went? Is that how that call went? Oh my gosh.
This guy that he was calling the parents on is 56 years old. So how old is his parents? How old are his parents? Like, why would they care about a call like that? It's just,
Slay King. Go slay that journo. Go slay the journalism.
call the 56-year-old's parents.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yes, Mr. and Mrs. McMillan. Yes, this is Mark Fisher with the Washington Post. I'm here to snitch. Yes. Somebody said, is his rap name Lil Bish? You have to laugh at this. If you cannot laugh at this, you have no soul. This is the most ridiculous thing ever. The guy was sharing, he just was sharing a comment or just sharing an opinion because that's what Twitter's used for. People think, and by people, I mean only people on the left apparently, they think if you share an opinion, that unless that opinion is countered, then Twitter has the magical power to make it happen in reality. If it stays unchallenged on Twitter, it shall become truth. That's how these people act. I cannot. I just can't even believe this guy called his parents. He called his parents.
But then he tweeted about it afterwards.
Oh no, he tweeted about it
wrote a story.
like he was hardcore. Yeah, I called his parents. And he's the guy who would walk around at the gym with his arms out, but nothing really to keep them out like that for. There's no.
It's like the male Karen.
Oh my gosh, he is the male Karen. He literally called and tried to speak to the manager and wrote a piece about it in the Washington Post. A record 3.3 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits as the Wuhan coronavirus has officially hit the United States. Now, I'm so glad you can't see my rundown because I was so mad when I was compiling some of this stuff. Let me just, this is how I'm looking, this is the perspective that I'm looking at this through. We had, I don't know, I think it's fair to say, I'm trying not to make universal statements, but I think it's pretty fair to say every network and pretty much every pundit, and especially if they were of one political persuasion, telling everybody that this is where if we all don't die, then everything's going to be awful and it's just going to be, and they were really, really going to town on some of these earlier models. Bookmark that. They were really going to town on some of these earlier models, the data that was showing that if we essentially did what Italy did, or if we did what China did, then this was going to be the ultimate result. And we knew that the whole flattening the curve and freezing the economy was going to have a huge financial impact. But now all of these people who were hyping everything up and even hyping the economy up, because what they were saying was that it was actually going to be worse than this. And they keep saying depression, scaring the hell out of everyone. Now all of these people are walking back their talking points. They're all walking it back. It's almost like if people would maybe scrutinize some of the models before they run off the cliff. The U.S. unemployment has hit highest for almost 40 than in 40 years now. And the other thing that was really, and I thought about this last night, and I've been working on a piece on it at danalash.com. And I didn't post anything up there last night because I was actually working on this, and it's still not finished. Again, just me. I was thinking about all of this with the context of Dan Patrick's remark, and then some of the stuff Glenn Beck has said, and Britt Hume, who got blown up when they were explaining that they were giving their opinion that if worse came to worse, and I mean, people can have opinions still, right? It is America, regardless of what you think of it. But everyone was reacting to the obvious that I think they missed a huge point here. Everyone was reacting to the sensationalized way, maybe, that the points were made, which they were just giving opinions. What they were discussing is that the bigger picture is that this is the United States economy. We are the economy that makes the world go round. It is the United States financial power. Whether it is our natural gas, whether it is our oil fields, whatever it is, the United States is the economy that powers the world. It is not in any way, it's not hyperbole. I mean, it's true. When you can't shut down the machine of the world. You cannot shut down the economic powerhouse of the planet. You cannot. And we have never had to have that conversation, not just as a nation, but as a world. And so people, even those who do this professionally, are trying to figure out in this hypersensitive era how to approach that conversation. No one is saying, let all the old people go out in a Logan's Run kind of deal and die for the youth. No moron, well, maybe a moron, but no one with two brain cells to rub together is thinking that that's what's happening. We're discussing where is the line, because the country still has to operate. We're the last beacon. Imagine, if you will. I told you I can bring anything back to Lord of the Rings, so I hope this satisfies Trevor, who on Facebook said, I bet you can't do it with this, and here we are. Imagine, if you will, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Actually, no, it was I guess you could say Two Towers. But it was right before the battle, one of the battles in the overall war for Middle-earth, and it's with the Kingdom of Rohan. So what happens to the Kingdom of Rohan? They all flee to Helm's Deep, this fortified bunker built into the side of a mountain. They all flee to Helm's Deep, and then they light the beacons one by one to notify all of the other kingdoms of men that this is it. This is probably one of the last battles that we are going to have in this war for Middle-earth. And they light the beacons one by one. We are the last beacon, so to speak. We are one of the last countries that has not fallen to although we do have socialism that has taken root in our economy and crony capitalism, it is the strength of the capitalism that makes up the majority of it that is giving it life. And if the United States falls, that's it. This is why I'm saying this is no one's saying that everyone go out and no one's saying that, but we do have to have a conversation about you cannot shut down the United States economy for months. You can't. Period. It is not realistic. You can't tell people to stay in their damn homes for 2 and 3 months. You can't. It's not realistic. We could sit here and point fingers all day. We can sit here and discuss, well, what is it that we could have done in order to be better prepared? Oh, I will have that conversation. Oh, I'm here. I'm wearing comfortable pants today. I am here for that. Let's do it. Now, you know that something is a true compromise when there are parts in it that both sides hate, and that's what the Senate bill is. But what are you going to do? This is the point that we're at. And I want to stress this point because some of you have reached out in email, not like to be ignorant, but to genuinely ask. You know that it's different from the TARP, the asset relief, whatever. You know that it's different from a lot of the stimulus. It's not actually, I don't know why they call it a stimulus because it's not what it is. The government is giving you back some of your money that you paid it. And this is why I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really like Chuck Schumer getting up there and saying, well, we're not going to send a check to so-and-so and so-and-so. This is our money here, champ. We paid you. That's our money. Every single damn dollar bill that I sent up to the U.S. government got my name on it. Every single, got Dana Lash on it. This is Dana Lash's dollar, right? This is Kane's dollar. This is Rachel's dollar. This is Steve's dollar. This is all y'all's dollar. Every one of those notes has your name on it because it is our money. This is the government given what we paid you. And whatever, by the way, what world do you have employees that just vote up themselves a raise? I would love to have done that previously. Oh, hell, I could do it now. I have voted to increase my salary myself. Just going to send this on up to the brass. Yeah, we'll just send it on up. But this is our money. This is not a stimulus. It is our money that we worked hard for. And we paid into the system for them to do their jobs and supposedly be good stewards of it. I think it's theft. This is the way the law is right now. By the way, sidebar, you know Ted Cruz was on the floor of the Senate the other day, and he gave like this huge 4-minute speech. He said a lot of things in there. I mean, we'd have to play almost the entire thing. And I was doing something while he was saying it. And he actually, at one point, he said, you know what? I would love to abolish the IRS. And I mean, I'm going to tell you what. You might as well play me a love song. When you say stuff like that, amazing. And he had said that. He's like, I would love to abolish the IRS. I'm not going to do it within the context of this Wuhan coronavirus relief bill. Good for him. I mean, he's a better person than I am because I sure as hell would stick it in there. I would. I'd be like, no, we're going to also abolish the IRS. I hear this kills the virus. That's me. This is why I'm not running for office because I do not like to compromise. Nor do you. That's why a lot of you are like, no, I'm not dealing with it. But he had said that up there. And I thought, first off, that was he. And he had said it before in the campaign trail, but he was really pushing it there. And I thought, this is amazing, number one. And number two, but he's making a good point. And a lot of the stuff that Democrats were putting in there is not serious stuff, right? So this is where I come back to the idea that this is somehow they're doing us all a favor. Now, I don't mind myself giving money to people who need it, who are struggling. I'm doing everything I can to help support these small local businesses that have been so good to not just my family, but my community with their service and taking care of us and all this stuff. I mean, everybody's getting a gift certificate for Christmas. You're getting a gift certificate. You're getting a gift certificate. Everybody's getting a gift certificate for Christmas. I'm like, okay, well, since I can't actually go in your store and do some stuff, here, I'm just going to go ahead and get a gift certificate, right? Like our dog groomer. We're like, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and we'll just pay for all of this up front. And, you know, just so we can make sure that you're coming back. She's really cool. She has it's like a little mobile dog grooming business. This is your money. I really want you to remember that because I feel like that's getting lost in a lot of this. There are a number of people that have never had to meet payroll. There are a number of people that have never, ever in their ever-loving lives ever started a business. They've never run a business. They've never even so much as been manager of a business. And these individuals think that they understand better than people who've actually created business what business owners need. And there are people who are falsely. Now, I say this as someone that I am not. It is really hard for me to accept this bill. And the reason why I'm not wholly against it is because this is not like TARP, and it is not like bailing out corporations or companies that have made stupid financial decisions and have led themselves to financial ruin because of the stupid financial decisions that they have made. This is strictly businesses that are suffering, and you could say it's because of some kind of quasi-eminent domain. I think that comparison holds up here. We're in a time of pandemic, and the government has shut down businesses, therefore preventing them from earning anything, preventing them from being able to earn money to pay their employees, to make payroll, to do whatever it is that they need to do. And as a result, this is not because of bad financial decisions from these companies that have been wholly successful. And you could say, well, didn't they have a rainy day fund? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they do have a rainy day fund. But if you're seriously asking that question as that's the panacea to this problem, you don't understand jack about any of this. But yeah, well, you know, it needs to be said because there's no business that's going to be able to save up and have enough in a rainy day fund to take care of months and months and months. And if you think that the fallout is going to be limited to only your 14-day quarantine period, you're a blockhead. I'm sorry. Some of these people need to wake up, and I'm going to use woke language to woke you up. How about that? This is some done with it. These businesses are going to be feeling the repercussions of this government mandated shutdown for months. There is no business that is going to have, particularly small businesses that are driving America, there is no business that is going to have the rainy day fund to be able to cover everything that they need to cover for months. So that's what we're discussing here. That is the big thing that we're discussing here. And so the criticism from Democrats is that there aren't enough worker protections. They think that we should just cut everyone a check like a couple of $1,000s, and that's going to do it. Let's ignore the companies. Pray tell, what's going to happen to these companies if we just completely ignore the fact that they're not going to be able to sustain this? These people, when we come out of this, are going to go back to companies, and in these companies' places are going to be a burned out ash shell because there's not going to be anything left. There will not be any jobs to come back to because there are not going to be any companies. And what you're going to see is the unemployment rate drive upwards towards 30%. That's what you're going to see. So we have to have a serious discussion about this. And honestly, I think the people who've never had to make payroll and who've never run a business should shut the hell up. 3, TJ from Las Vegas. Welcome, TJ.
Dana.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Dana. I'm listening to on channel 248 Pluto.
Woo!
And watching, too.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. My thing is, as we sit at home, all of us, and we're sequestered, there are unknown amount of people that are walking around the streets day and night. And my feeling is that they're not being watched or taking, and nobody's taking swabs to find out whether they're infected. And it's time to clean up this type of thing, because I don't think it's a coincidence that the places that have the highest amount of people that are infected also have the highest amount of vagrants in their populations.
Well, I think that there is, and I appreciate you calling in, TJ, and I hope you're keeping safe and healthy. I think we also need to keep the homeless population in our mind, whatever, and keep an eye on those who are homeless, because if you would have that virus kick off in those communities, my gosh, it would spread like wildfire. And again, go back to second century Christians. They went where people wouldn't. We got to keep that in mind.